Hello, and welcome to my dining room. This is episode 19 of the Live and Learn Knitting Podcast. My name is Anne or Annie, and I live on the banks of the Mississippi River in western Wisconsin. And I do this podcast about every 2 weeks or so, depending on what life throws at me. And I share primarily my knitting, but I also do other creative pursuits, and we'll talk about those. There's actually a little bonus non-knitting activity today. So let's get started. I've started titling these episodes, and maybe that was a mistake because the only thing I could think about to title this one today was Hello June, because it's June 1st today. Saturday, June 1st, 2024. And the things I'm going to talk about don't really relate to each other, so there was no theme. So the theme is June, and there's that great Rodgers and Hammerstein song, June is busting out all over, and it really is. I gardened all day yesterday outside and made a tiny bit of progress, but not really. You're never done if you're gardening. So there's always more to do. But it was good to be outside yesterday. Today we have a nice, gentle morning rain happening. And it's not supposed to last all day, but it might be too wet to do anything outside the rest of the day, which is a good thing because I've got plenty of indoor chores to do. And I want to get working on some of my knitting backlog projects. And I just have to stop and look outside just a moment. There's one of those little red squirrels out there. And I was wondering what he's doing. I think he or she is trying to get over to a suet feeder that I put out for the birds. And I have a couple things hanging there, and he was off of this one globe. He's up to no good. As long as he stays out of the garage, he's fine. He or she is fine. But I have had my challenges with them getting into the garage, and that's not good. At any rate, let's proceed with today's things to talk about. There was a little bit of living the last few weeks. Thank you all for your kind words about, feel better soon. Last episode, I had a bad head cold and a lot of congestion and, a bronchitis-y type cough to deal with. And that has probably 99% cleared up. I think it's gone. I cough just a little bit now, and I think maybe if there's any congestion now, it's just the seasonal allergies. So I appreciate that. I also am dealing with a broken elbow, which is healing slow but sure. I seem to do a little bit more every day, but then I overdo it and I go 2 steps back, so that's just how it is with summer or life. I'm just too busy to stop and rest. When I do get a good rest day in, I can really feel the benefits of it. So hopefully that will continue to heal. Right now I can just tell I don't have enough arm strength for pushing. I don't have enough arm strength for pulling. I'm having to pull weeds two-handed on some of the stubborn weeds. But luckily, I can knit and do needlework and any other things like that just fine. So thank goodness. So there's that for living. And then just this past Tuesday, one of the knitting groups that I meet and have lunch with I don't go every week, but we do have opportunities to get together once a week, and we lunch and then we knit for a while. And this past Tuesday we had a yarn swap, which was an awful lot of fun. It's the second time we've done it. And Jean and Nancy coordinate it and arrange it all. And there are a few rules, ground rules, so that so that it's equitable. And so we had a dollar amount, here, bring a skein of yarn, this dollar amount, up to 5 to throw into a swap pile, and then we draw numbers and, go by the numbers of who gets to pick first out of what's all there to choose from. And so those are, kind of a one-on-one exchange. And then we also had a category for a sweater's quantity worth of yarn. And I had a couple, well, one for sure, but I ended up, sweater's quantity worth of yarn. I ended up not taking it. And I think only one other person brought a sweater's quantity worth. And then that, so there was no swap going on there. I think that just got put into the regular swap arrangement then. But then we also had are you tired of it? Does it not sing to you anymore? Do you have too much? Was this leftovers? We had that kind of a thing where it was just a giveaway table. So we did the swap part first, and everybody took their turns, pulled their numbers, and went in turns, and got good picks, I was watching, and it's like, oh, that one got taken. Oh, well, there's another one. There's something else I like, So as we went around the room, it was a lot of fun to see what everybody else was interested in and what they were gonna, what they were gonna do with all this new to them yarn. And so then after that was all finished, that round was finished, then we put all of the giveaway items, and it was yarn and some equipment and, needle cases and project bags and patterns and books and just all kinds of things. And that was just a big free-for-all then, there it all is. Everybody dig in and take what you like. And not everything went, some things we had to agree, to take back anything that was left over at the end. And that's fine. That's absolutely fair, yes. And so a lot of it I'd say probably a good 75 to 80% of it found new homes, which was great. And I took things that, just didn't speak to me anymore, or, there's just not enough time to do it all. So, and I wish I only found out about it a week ago, and I still ended up with a big tote of stuff to take. And I thought, gosh, how am I going to find anything in a week? And then the night before, a couple days before, when I was going upstairs and sorting through and saying, oh, this can go and this can go. And then I thought, gosh, it's maybe good I only had a week, because I could have probably found more. So, it was a lot of fun. And we ate at a really great restaurant in La Crosse called Fork and Fable. And one of the ladies in our group, Wendy, her son is one of the co-owners and chefs there. And the food was just delicious. It was really top notch and so good. Yes. I really like going there to lunch. So we had a great afternoon. And I'm just going to suggest, if you have a group at all, you might want to think about doing something like that. And, making sure that everybody understands that it's a swap, and, no hard feelings if you don't feel like you came away with as good as you took. That's, that's not the point of it. The point of it is just to have some fun. And we sure did. We had a lot of fun. So, and the things that I brought home, well, some of them are challenges, we'll see. We'll see if I can come up with something to do with these. There was 4 balls of this gray yarn. It's sort of a cotton slubby yarn. And so it's only 200 grams, about 400 yards. And it's not enough to make a top, for sure. Not for me anyway. Maybe for a tiny, tiny person, yes, but not for me. But I'm looking at it thinking, well, what could I do with it, Garments, I think, are the first thing we think about. It would actually be a nice weaving yarn. So that might be a thought. I shouldn't try so hard to think of a knitted idea for it. It might end up being something good for weaving. So we'll see. too many projects, too little time. So before we get into today's one project and a couple other side projects, I'll tell you what I'm wearing. One of my friends suggested I should always wear something, show up to these episodes, show up in something that I made. And in the summertime, that's going to be kind of hard because summer sweaters for me they're thin on the ground. And I have one that's almost finished that I should finish, and actually two. So maybe next time I'll have a new completed garment to share. But this is old. This could have been, a throwback Thursday if it was the day. So this is actually, I'll stand up here. You can see it's a V-neck. And it's quite long on me. It goes, I like the length of it. Here's the length, right there. So it goes down. It covers my lower, but it's not a tunic length. But this is a sweater that I designed myself. It's a bottom-up construction. I knit it in, it's probably 1995, 94, 95. Because I remember knitting it, working on it while I was at knitting camp, and I had gotten up to the neck. I was almost finished with it. And this V-neck shaping, I love it, and I had learned this, it was fairly new to me how to do the center double decrease so that you got this nice, feature going up the center of the V-neck. But I did think it's a very high V-neck on me. I wanted it maybe more like that. And I remember making that comment that I thought the V was, here's where the raglan body shaping started. So then here's where I probably should have started the V either at the same time or here. And I didn't. And I was commenting on not knowing when to do that or how to, since I was designing this myself, how to figure that out. And there was a woman at knitting camp that year. Her name was Ann Regis, and I believe she worked, I want to say she was working at Vogue Knitting at the time, either that or Knitters, but I think Vogue Knitting. She's from New York City, and she was offering to, I feel so bad about this because she was offering to, well, here's how you do the geometry to figure that out. And I mean, we were overwhelmed with all of the techniques that we were learning in class and everything. And this was just like our free time knitting that I mentioned this, and, and she was offering, and I was kind of brusque, and I said, oh, I can't figure that all out, oh, I don't want to figure that all out, or, oh, and so she just said, well, okay. And, there she was, the knitting expert person, willing to help me learn something, and I just blew her off, and I thought, I've regretted that for almost 30 years now, that I shouldn't have done that. I should have just, oh, please show me. I would love to learn. Instead of, oh, no, that's okay. You don't need to tell me that. Someday I'll figure it out. How terrible of me to say that. And I have not even tried again to do this. Now I knit top down, and we have other situations to worry about as far as construction goes. But what I used to do this design was because these were my early years of becoming an Elizabeth Zimmerman devotee and going to knitting camp. I'd gone 3 years. I think there was 1 year where I might have skipped, but I went 92, 93, 95 or something like that, or maybe 4 years. 95 might have been my last, or 96, my last year. 3 or 4 years. It was great fun. It was great fun. I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot every summer, except I didn't learn how to be polite, obviously. But I learned a lot. And at the same time that we were, I was learning all the Elizabeth Zimmerman techniques and the percentage system and everything, there was this book, Jacqueline Fee's Sweater Workshop. And I'm not sure if I talked about this before in one of the early episodes. I may have. But this book basically does take Elizabeth's percentage system and goes through a lot of techniques on how to make a basic bottom-up sweater with whatever kind of, I think they're all raglan shaping in this version. And then there's actually, this is a lot heavier. This one, spiral bound, nice lace flat. This is the second edition, and you see it says more sweaters, new designs, and additional text and photos. So, yes, more. And now, does she go into other designs besides a raglan? I am not sure. I bought this because there's more stuff in it. I don't think I've looked at the more stuff yet. But the photos in this one are in color, which is nice. Like, look, here's an example of all kinds of different sleeve techniques. Isn't that, interesting? Something we need to know. In this edition, all of these photos are black and white. So, yeah. Nice to have, well, I shouldn't say all. There are a few color photos, but a lot of them are, black and white. And yeah, this one was like how to figure out how to plan stripes in a garment. But you start out knitting, if you're following the sweater workshop, and I actually did, I don't know if I did this or not, if I did the whole thing even. I'm not sure. But anyway, this is just a little practice piece that goes through all of the techniques that she talks about in the book. It's the type of edging, the types of ribbing, how to put a stripe in your ribbing, which is a valuable thing. How to do, I forget what this is, if that's not applied I-cord, I don't think. It's just another technique. Here's a little button in a buttonhole. Here's an afterthought pocket. Forget what that is. And then like all around the top here where she's doing some decreasing, that's showing you go around and do various types of decreases so you can see how they look. And there's a little bit of color work up here. There's a lace edging. There's a hem with putting your initials in the hem. That was one of the things Elizabeth Zimmerman used to do in her sweaters. If she made a hemmed edge, she would do stranded knitting and put either the name of the recipient in the hem or the name of the sweater in the hem or the date, and so that was always a little folded surprise to find when you were, wearing that sweater, which I thought was pretty neat. So a lot of techniques in this, packed into this book, and good information. And I did, read it like a textbook kind of a thing and learn a lot of techniques. And this, as well as knitting camp, really gave me the confidence to design something on my own. Now, this, see, it's very fuchsia, hot pink. I used to wear this color all the time. I'm not sure I'm a fan of it anymore. And I wasn't even sure what yarn this was. This was the 90s. There are probably some notes somewhere, maybe in a notebook or on floppy disks if I wrote it in the computer. had a little computer journal, but I wasn't sure. But looking on Ravelry this morning, I thought, okay, I know this. I remember. This is Peyton's Cotton Sahara yarn, and it's 100% cotton, or maybe like I should have looked, a nylon cotton blend. I think it's 100% cotton. And it's sort of a boucle, which gives this sweater the texture of a terry cloth towel, which is nice if you want a terry cloth towel. It's not that comfortable. It's comfortable because it's cotton and it's soft, but it's also terry cloth, and it's lightweight, but it's heavy. At the same time, how can that be? I don't wear this very often, for those reasons, I guess. I'm when I put it on this morning, another thing is, I go up and down in size, or have been. So I think when I made this, it fit for a little while, and then it didn't fit anymore, and it was too tight to wear. And especially, I can tell the bottom cast on edge, it's very, very tight, very tight. I did not know how to cast on loosely when I knit this. So it's taut, and it doesn't have any give to it. So when I was when I was larger, I'm sure that really cut in and pulled in a lot just from that tight edge. It doesn't necessarily do that on the sleeves. The sleeves are okay, but the bottom, maybe I got more relaxed. Maybe I learned that at knitting camp that year, how to cast on loosely. But yeah, it's got that at the bottom. It's a good fit as far as getting this right, getting the underarm, depth. That's really good. It doesn't, a lot of times you get a lot of poofing at the underarm. But it just feels, even if it isn't bulky under the arm, it feels bulky under the arm because of the texture of the yarn. And it is, I guess a bulky or a chunky type of a yarn. This boucle texture to it, and I'm rubbing it all over. It's more suited, I think, for toweling or something else. It's just not my favorite sweater. But I put it on today, summer sweater. We'll see if I keep it on all day or not. I don't know. It's fine right now, really. I think that's the thing, when it's a cooler day today, so it feels okay. When it's warmer, it starts to feel heavy and draggy, and probably gets hot and sweaty, and I don't know. So this isn't bad. It's not choking me, but it's not where I wanted it to be. And I'm pretty sure there's no short rows in the back of the neck, which might have been another thing that Ann Regis was going to teach me. I just was, no, that's okay. So, yeah. Maybe someday I'll try to make another one. Who knows? But it's, and I'm not knocking. It's not this book's fault that this sweater is not my favorite. No, because I made other sweaters out of this book using the method, and they turned out great. They did. So yeah, I had one that was an all-over cable design. That was for a friend, my friend Patrice, who raised sheep and had wool spun and didn't knit, so she asked me to knit her things, so I did that. And I also knit a sweater for her husband that had like flying geese on it, on the yoke of it. Yeah, so those sweaters worked out just fine using that method. Definitely. This one, not so much. but it's okay. It's an okay sweater. Enough about it. On to something that's really, really okay. And this is why I'm doing the podcast today, because I'm giving these as a gift on Friday. So I wanted to show them to you. These are the Hedgerow Fingerless Mitts by Marianne Steffens, or Steffens, and they are a gift for my yoga instructor and friend Laura. Her daughter Ava is graduating from high school and going to, look at that match right there in the center, going to UW-Madison in the fall, and Madison colors are red and white and a little bit of black, but red and white primarily. So I wanted to make her something red and white, and I knew she'd probably buy the official, UW hat and all of that, but mitts, maybe not. So yeah, fingerless mitts, and isn't that nice? I really enjoyed working this pattern. It's got ribbing and then corrugated ribbing, which you can see carries up here, but yet the colorwork pattern starts, and these leaves are just fun. And then same thing here, the ribbing goes up there, and then you pick up, you're working the thumb gusset, and there's a little bit of pick up here and knit around and knit up, knit a bit of rib at the top for the thumb. They have a real good fit. I like the length coming down. Like, here's my wrist. There's where my wrist is, and so it comes down your hand really nicely. I'm going to make probably another pair of these for myself. Not sure what yarn I'll use, or colors, but I enjoyed this. It was a quick knit, and yeah. And the yarn I did use for this pair is Ralma Fennel yarn. And now this yarn has been named 3 times. It's Ralma Fennel Garn, and Ralma Fennel, I don't know if that's part 2 or point 2 or PT2, but this is not the most recent iteration of the name. It's just back to Ralma Fennel, I think. I got these at Blue Heron Knittery in Decorah when I went down at the beginning of the month to the plant sale. I stopped in there because I knew they would have non-superwash wool in, I had already decided this is what I was going to make. So I knew they'd have this yarn in a non-superwash wool in the weight I needed, which was, they call this a sport. I think it's more like a heavy fingering or a fingering. Again, I'm a loose knitter, so to me this is a fingering. But I knew they'd have this in a lot of, they have it in a lot of colors, so they would have the colors I needed, which were the red and the white. And I bought 2 skeins, just because, I mean, that's 75 miles away. I didn't want to run out and have to, I didn't want to have to run back because it's too far to go at the drop of a hat. So I got 2 skeins of red and white, and then I did get a skein of black for future projects, for accent, because you can always use black and white and red. So yeah, and of course, this is a wool that is made in Norway, of Norwegian. It says Norwegian wool, so from Norwegian sheep, spun in Norway. And that's one reason why Blue Heron carries it is, Vesterheim Norwegian Heritage Museum, which is right down the street from them. They do classes, and they do some knitting classes. And this is the yarn they use a lot of times in their knitting classes. And they do, Scandinavian Nordic colorwork classes. And that's why they have all the colors in that. And it's lovely. Lovely stuff. And it washed up, it feels woolly in the ball, but when you wash it, this is soft. This is very soft. It's not scratchy wool. This could be, for me, next to the skin sweater wool, for sure. So, yes, very, very happy. And the pattern, again, I said was Hedgerow Fingerless Mitts by Marianne Steffens. And look at all the color options she shows there. I think it's just a nice cover page to her pattern. And the pattern, very well written. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. And if you go to the link that's on Ravelry and click on it, it takes you to Marianne's homepage, webpage, which shows all of her patterns. And you have to scroll down till you get to the Fingerless Mitts one. And when you click on that, it opens up the PDF for the pattern, and then you can just download that directly. And she's got some other patterns for doing stranded color work on the Christmas ornaments. You know, she's got some motifs to follow if you wanted to do. And I like to make those Christmas ornaments, the knitted Christmas balls. So I was excited to see that, and I might try some of her, because I was making some up on my own. So it'd be great to, you know, try some that are already thought out. So yeah, it's a really good pattern. She has notes in the pattern, not too many, but you know, she talks about like how much yarn you'll need. It's just a one size mitt. You could adjust it up or down a little bit by the size needle that you use. You know, and she gives you tips for how to do that. If you knit loosely, try this. If you knit tightly, try this. So I think it's something that if you already know that like this number of stitches works for you for a mitt or a sock, you'll know that you know which size needles and yarn to choose. If you've been knitting long enough to kind of have that go-to number and needle size in your head, this will work. And if not, you know, this would be a good opportunity to knit a pair and see what size they turn out. And you know, the gift for if they don't fit you, gift for someone else. Because the whole project took 50 grams of yarn. So, you know, parts, and a little bit more red, of course, than white, but parts of 2 balls of yarn, 50 grams, which that's really good value for a gift. These were, with the tax at Blue Heron, $9.54 a ball. And for a nice natural wool yarn like this, that's a really good price, really good value. And again, to get all the different colors for color work and consistency, you know, that is a big important thing as well. So definitely, you know, here's a gift for, if you go by grams, $10. If you go by the fact that I had to buy 2, you know, almost $19, but I can get 2 pair of mitts for that. So well worth it. Well worth the money. And the needle says, let's see, I'll go back to the pattern a sec. There were a couple deviations that I did from the pattern, just little things that I have learned over the years. And I don't know, I really don't know if she mentioned this. I think I just did it. No, she says just start right in at the chart. When you are knitting ribbing, and she has, you know, knit one, purl one, but you're doing this corrugated ribbing. If I had started the first row, the purls, you would have seen a red blip. And so what I did was the first row of the colorwork ribbing, I did knit one red, knit one white. I just knit and alternated the colors around because that eliminates that blip of color you get when you're changing color in ribbing. If that makes sense. I'm not sure I'm describing that very well, but yeah, it eliminates that. So, and I did the same thing at the top here. When I switched back to the red, I did a whole round of knit versus doing right into the knit one, purl one red ribbing. So you didn't get a blip of white showing on that first round. And you know what I mean. If you if you did it and didn't do that, you'd see that blip of color. I was going to do some samples and show you. I'll do that another time because I will use that technique again. I use it often when changing colors. So that was one of the things that isn't in her pattern that is a helpful thing to do. Another thing was that she talks about when you put the stitches for the thumb, and there's just a few, she talked about putting them on 2 safety pins and making sure that they're in the direction, that you put the stitches on the pins in the direction so that you can easily knit them off or slip them off when you're ready to. Well, I have fussed with pins or stitch holders in the past, and they are kind of fussy. And the pins can snag on the stitches. So I just always slip mine onto a bit of scrap yarn. And usually I use a scrap yarn that's bigger than the stitches, because if you use it the same or smaller, the live stitches are going to have a tendency to drop back into the knitting. So I use something that's bigger so that they stay lifted up. And then it was really easy for me to just slip my needle in alongside that waste yarn, and I used a smooth waste yarn. Actually, I used it doubled, a yarn that I have. It was a Barocco Comfort Sock. So that's an all acrylic. It's very smooth, very round yarn. And I was able to just slip in alongside of it while it was still holding the stitches. And then once I got them on 2 double pointed needles, or 2 or 3, I was able to just then pull it out. And again, this is a small amount of stitches, so that happened easily. If you're doing it on a larger circumference, maybe a neckline or something, you might have to fiddle with it a little more. But for this thumb end, it worked really, I think, a lot better than the pins. The pins, because for one thing, the pins can sort of get in the way while you're still doing this, until you get away from this bit here. So that waste yarn is softer, more malleable. It can get out of the way easier. So that's one thing. And then the other, this might just be me, but she wanted you to, when you picked up then to do this thumb, pick up just 1 stitch, and she told which color it was going to be, so that it matched the knit one, purl one, the color that you had going. Well, I always find that those openings are bigger than, I knew I'd need to do more than 1 stitch. But because it needed to match the color pattern repeat, I had to do 3 stitches, which I thought, well, I will just decrease them right away. But really, doing 3 stitches, that still fits well. I mean, it would have been just a tiny bit snugger with 2 less stitches, but it's not loosey-goosey by any means. So do what makes sense for you and the pattern. I mean, I wouldn't have stuck with, if I would have stuck with that one stitch, I would have had to do a lot more snugging up with waste yarn, you know, when I was sewing the ends in underneath to tidy up those big holes that were on each side of the stitches. And so I think that's pretty, pretty good as far as there's no big gap there and it's tidy. So that's another little thing that I learned that's not in the pattern. Otherwise, I think that's about it. I really enjoyed the pattern. Well, I will say one other thing. Last thing, I promise. Corrugated ribbing. It's fine. I'm looking at this and it's fine. This is knit 1, purl 1. And I've done, most of the corrugated ribbing that I've done has been knit 2, purl 2. And corrugated ribbing does not pull in. It's not elastic. It doesn't have any squish to it. It's gonna stay this shape nice and even. For some reason on the thumb, she did not say to do the thumb in corrugated ribbing. And if you look at that's just plain stockinette then, and changing the colors. And I think that's just fine. And while it's just a, bit of interest of texture, add some texture to it at the top and the bottom, I think it would have been just fine to do alternate knits all the way around. And, just had your little bit of ribbing at the bottom and the top in the solid color and not necessarily knit that in purls. What do you think? I mean, it's fine, but I think the next pair I make, I'm going to try it without and just do plain knitting for that section and see. I think it'll be fine as well. So knitter's choice in that respect. But give these a try. They were a lot of fun. And yes, look, I just love that symmetry there where you put the two sides together. And I did keep track. I used a little on the chart. I had a Post-it note going across the chart so that I could keep track of what row I was on. I know there's that highlighter tape that a lot of people use. I have some. I just didn't want to go and hunt for it. It's not in my downstairs knitting bag. So I could have used that. And it's funny, this is the first pattern. Well, I was just so excited to get going on this pattern. I started it that night in the hotel room in Decorah, and I didn't, I hadn't printed the pattern off, so I was just using it from my phone or my iPad. And then when I got home, I printed just the chart, and because I did need the chart, it was easier to follow it printed out than from my phone. It was kind of small. So, and as far as the size needle I used, I forgot to write that down, and I think I used a 1.5. US sizes, when it gets down in the low ends of metrics, are kind of funny, but that was one of the things that I happily splurged on at Blue Heron. This was all the yarn I bought. I bought yarn for these mitts, and I didn't even really look at any of the other yarn. But Sarah and Onita had just come back from H&H Americas, the trade show in Chicago, and they did have a basket of samples that they brought back, and they were like 1 ounce samples from, I want to say Wonderland Yarns or Mountain Colors. And they're Mountain Colors, I think. And there was one skein in there, a mini skein, that it just spoke to me. It called my name. So I bought that. But otherwise, I didn't buy any yarn. But I bought needles because one of the things I like about Blue Heron is they have a wall of needles, and you can So many sizes, brands, varieties of length and all that. It's a really nice needle selection. So I got the Addy Turbo Circulars in the 12-inch in these oddball sizes that I didn't even know existed. Like I got a 0, a 1, and a 2, of course, but then I got something called a 2.75, which I don't metrically know how that falls into the US numbers, and a 2.25. And so it was one of those odd ones that I used to knit the mittens. Yeah. And it was just a guess, well, I'll try these and see how it works. So it worked fine. But I was really happy to get those 12-inch needles, 12-inch circulars. That's what I like to use for socks and for knitting round, small circumference things, rather than the DPNs. And yeah, it was great to see them there and find them. I appreciated that very much. So that's my gifty project. And I'll talk about one other thing that's not knitting. Last year, I think I might have mentioned, when I crocheted, I used to, last episode when I talked about that, I did like to make doilies, but I don't know what to do with these doilies anymore. And I had seen this, to me, inspiration piece that I think is, I'll put it in the show notes, in Japan, where they crocheted these huge doily motifs and sewed them all together to make giant sea urchins out of crochet. And it's not a new thing. They've been around a while. I'm not sure if they're still up or not, but they were big and beautiful. And I thought, oh my gosh, putting your crochet as an outdoor sculpture, that's really cool. And I would like to do that someday. I'd like to, crochet some big thing and put it outside. So last year I got the idea, and I don't even know if I've seen this on the internet anywhere. I don't think exactly this thing, but I got some wire. These are actually plant supports that you can buy at the, garden center. And then they come with little stakes to put them in to, hold up your peonies and all that kind of thing. So look, I put a doily on it. And now this doily used to be, you can barely see bits of pink. This used to be pink and white variegated. And it just fit perfectly on this ring, on this hoop. And then I hung this outside for the summer. And it was so pretty. I'll put a picture, if I can put a picture in the show notes, I'm not sure. Maybe if I get that blog that I promised y'all going again, I'll show it in there, of what it looked like when it was first hung, because it was stunning with the color. And I kind of thought it might fade, and it did. It faded to pretty much white. But in the wintertime, having this hung outside, it was just like a snowflake hanging out there off of a shepherd's hook. I was going to hang them from trees, but I had a few empty shepherd's hooks. So I did this one, and I had a smaller one that was blue. And that also faded pretty much to white. And it's great. Now this one, I have it in the house because you can see right here, it came apart. And it's probably from right up at the top here, maybe where this is, and this was where it was hung, had a little bit more wear on it. And I might just mend this and put it back out for another summer and see, because the rest of it is in pretty good shape. Yeah, maybe it's too soon to give up on this one. But I gave up on the blue one. The blue one also had a break in it and fell apart a little more. So the blue one, I took off the hoop and got rid of it. But I have other doilies, and I thought, oh, well, I should find some more to put outside. So the other day, this is a smaller hoop, put this doily on it, and I'm trying to decide if I want to hang this outside. I might just want to hang this in a window so that it doesn't wear out so fast, because those were only outside for a year. So yeah, isn't that, I think that's kind of pretty. I don't know, I just wouldn't put it on a table anymore, but I kind of like the idea of hanging it. Let's see, where's my windows over here? Hanging it in one of these windows. I can't really show that to you. My arm doesn't reach that far. But yeah, I might do that. We'll see. Think about it. And then just yesterday, I was upstairs looking for some yarn to tie up one of my hanging plants. You have a hook at the top of it, and the plastic then goes down to the hanging planter and hooks onto it. Well, one of those broke, the second one. And last year I had replaced the other one with string, cord of some kind. So I went upstairs, looked for more cord. Couldn't find the same stuff I used last year, so I crocheted a cord out of cotton, and I went and strung it all back up, and it's hanging there. But I have a feeling that's stretching, because today it looks like it's hanging at an angle. And you can't really see it from here, but it's out that door window. Anyway, while I was upstairs looking for that and crocheting my chain, I found this one. So I think I have more hoops now. I think I'm going to try and stretch this out on a hoop, and this one will probably go outside, because I am not that much in love with it. But once it gets stretched out on the hoop, it's probably going to look really interesting, really cool. So something to do, if you have doilies that you aren't using anymore, maybe give this a try. And why I like these hoops from the garden center is just this, that they come apart and then hook back together, so that you can feed. I don't have to sew this with a needle and thread to get this all on. I just was able to do this, feed the doily around it, and then lock it together again. So easy. The alternative, of course, would be a solid hoop and then stitch it on. But this went on in a minute or two. So yeah, so that's my project. Or you find doilies at the thrift store or the flea markets, and that you might have some upstairs. Try that with the hoop, and even just hang them in a window. It's kind of pretty. So there's that. And finally, like I said, the rain has sort of stopped for now, but I have a lot of inside chores to do today. But my treat, my other little bit of living this week, because I wanted to, I didn't even mention it. Go back to these. The increasing, to do this thumb gusset, Marianne, in her directions, has very brief, very concise how to do a make one right and a make one left. And I thought to myself, I would, I followed the directions. How unique for me. Because my usual go-to for doing these is just to do a backward loop, and I don't care which way I've made it, and it doesn't matter anyway, right? And I thought, you know what? Since these are a gift and I want them to be as nice as possible, I'm going to follow the directions. And I made the make one right and the make one where and when she told me to, and I made it where and went following her directions of how to do it. And yeah, who knew that it turns out pretty cool when you do it following the instructions. Amazing. Yeah. So, but it brought to mind, because it was doing a lifted increase. And there are all kinds of ways to make increases. And Elizabeth Zimmerman, in her videos, would talk about just doing a backward loop is the easiest. And you can make the backward loop this way, or you can make it this way. And that was the front, how you got them to mirror each other. It was depending on which, and I can never remember which way goes on which side. That's why I don't mess with it. I might just cut out Marianne's directions and save them for future. But what Elizabeth said also was, if you just do the backward loop increase, that takes one row. If you do the lifted increase, you're actually doing the same thing, but you're doing it over 2 rows, because you're lifting the stitch in the row below and making that backward loop by putting it, on the needle, back on the needle, and then knitting into it, either from the front or the back, and depending on how you put it on the needle. So that is the same thing as just making a backward loop. Now the thing about it is that if you make the backward loop and do it just in the one row, that's going to be a little looser, because if you are scooping it up from the row below, you don't have as much of a carry in between there. You don't have as much free yarn in between there. So that's going to be a little snugger. So I think there are reasons and times where both are appropriate, one or the other. Neither one of them is any more better or worse or right or wrong. For me, for ease of making things, I usually just do the backward loops, but I thought I'd be fancy this time and do it like this. And it worked, and I'm happy. But it got me in mind of Marianne, or of Elizabeth Zimmerman and her video series, and where she talked about that, and I wanted to try and find that for you. And I realized, I have so many of her videos on VHS tape, and I have a few on DVD, but there's so many, and I thought, I've always, because I don't have a VCR anymore, I was always looking for one, and you can't find, I haven't been able to find a good one for a reasonable price, near to me, that worked. All those kinds of things. If you buy something from a thrift store, you're not 100% sure it's going to work. They say they've tested them, but do they, does it just turn on? You don't know how good it plays. Anyway, I looked on online on the internet and found somebody selling one in La Crosse. So the day that I went to lunch, I went and picked up this VCR for only $30. I thought that was a pretty good buy. Brought it home, plugged it in really quick after. It was a long day, and I came home and I plugged it in, and I plugged it into my old TV, and I couldn't get it to work. And I thought, oh no. I've got the red, white, and yellow cables. They're going into the red, white, and yellow holes on the TV. What is wrong? What is wrong? I put the tape in. It says it's playing. I have no picture. I have no sound. It's on. It added the component. What is wrong? I don't know what to try next. The next day, I was knitting with some friends, and Becky said, well, are you making sure you have input going to input and output going to, going out and coming in the right direction? And I'm like, I don't know. I just took 5 minutes, and I don't know. I'll go look. Well, when I got home that afternoon, sure enough, on the back of the VCR, there were 2 more, there was another row of red, white, and yellow. So I moved the plugs over one, and voila, picture and sound, and Meg Swanson knitting, sewing, doing the Dubelmosa hat. And I was like, oh, happiness, joy, reunited with these wonderful videos. So this afternoon, this is on my plan, this afternoon or tonight after I get my chores done and I'm sitting down with my knitting, instead of watching a modern podcast or YouTube video, I'm going back old school and gonna look at some of my Elizabeth Zimmerman, Meg Swanson videos and learn some stuff. And if you've not seen these, try and find them at the library, or however, invest in one. They are just so great. Here's a coat. And some of these, the Meg Swanson ones are individual projects, but there's always a lot of techniques in here. Like this one has everything from choosing wool, casting on, pattern shading, fade, prehistoric fade. Sorry, I just said prehistoric. That's man, that's not nice. But what do they call that? That's like the origin story of fade. That's better, right? Body shaping, snow cuffs. I remember, yeah, the snow cuffs inside bigger cuffs. 3-needle I-cord cast off, the hood construction, machine stitching and cutting because this was steeked, sewing in the sleeves, finishing, and afterthought pockets. That's a world of techniques in this project, and it's a big project. There's another one. This jacket, I always have wanted to make this. This was one of the ones that she had just designed one of the years I was at knitting camp. And it's garter stitch, knit in 2 halves, all garter stitch with stockinette sleeves. And there's a unique approach to shaping, including a number of useful and perhaps startling techniques for no-sew assembly. Oh, beautiful. And I have the wool upstairs to make that, so maybe this will be the one I watch. They'll get me going on that project. So just so happy to have that again. So I want to thank you for sticking with me. This was an hour. I thought I'd make summer episodes a bit shorter, but I had 3 things to talk about instead of just one. So there you go. So thank you for watching. I hope it was at least entertaining, and a bit educational, inspirational. So enjoy your projects. Try something new. Try to work with something old, Yeah, and just have fun. Summer is a time for experimentation and small projects. Elizabeth has in one of her books, The Knitter's Almanac, where her summer chapters are fiddle faddle in the North Woods, where she's making little things because it's summer and it's too hot to hold big projects, right? So yeah, definitely small summer projects are good. And maybe a cotton sweater or 2 in a yarn you like. Oh yeah. So enjoy your weekend, enjoy your knitting, your creating, your making, your baking, summer food, all of that goodness, summer activities. It's a good time to be busy and active and have fun. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.